Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Derrick Broze with activist posts, theantimedia.org, Mind Unleashed, and the Conscious Resistance Network. Today is Tuesday, May 16th, 2017, and I'm bringing you a news story which I'm sure you've heard some details by now regarding the death of Seth Rich, the former Democratic National Committee staffer who is, some believe, the source for the DNC Democratic National Committee leaks that began last summer in 2016 and affected the Clinton campaign, namely because they showed collusion and corruption within the Democratic Party to try to push Bernie Sanders out and to work with corporations, to work with Goldman Sachs, and that Debbie Wasserman Schultz, the DNC chairman at the time, was involved in this collusion, and that Clinton was basically a corporatist, what most of us knew her to be. So these leaks began in July 2016, only 12 days after DNC staffer Seth Rich was killed. And the leaks, as I said, they exposed Clinton, and some say damaged her campaign chances and hurt her ability to even become president. Those who were in support of WikiLeaks and supporting Donald Trump came out and said that it's possible that Seth Rich was killed for being the leaker. Perhaps he was the source of the leaks that WikiLeaks and others had, while the left-wing media, the pro-Hillary media, came out and said, no, this is the result of Russian hackers. Officially, the leaks came from a character known as Guccifer 2.0, and Guccifer is, no one knows who exactly it is or who this persona is. Again, the Deadstream media, the Hillary Clinton supporters say there's clear evidence that this is coming from Russian intelligence teams, and Guccifer is just a cover-up. Meanwhile, others say it's possible that Guccifer is just some other hacker who had access to the documents that Seth Rich leaked, and then those were passed on further to WikiLeaks. So you have two different stories going on, and this has been going on for the last year now. Now, just early this morning, there was a report from Fox 5 in D.C. claiming that Rod Wheeler, I believe is his name, Rod Wheeler, a former D.C. police homicide detective, is now running a parallel investigation into Rich's murder, where he said there was a cover-up and that the police department in D.C. has been told to back down or, quote, stand down from the investigation. He said, the police department nor the FBI have been forthcoming. They haven't been cooperating at all. I believe that the answer to solving his death lies on that computer, which I believe is either at the police department or at the FBI. I have been told both. And they say that when they asked him about his sources, if there was information that links Seth Rich to WikiLeaks, he said, absolutely, that is confirmed. So you have this former investigator talking to Fox in D.C., saying that he has a source inside the police department telling officers to stand down, to not look into Seth Rich's murder. And then you have the family of Seth Rich, their spokesman, coming out and saying that Wheeler was not authorized to speak on behalf of them and that his claims are unsubstantiated. This is their official statement. We are a family who is committed to facts, not fake evidence that surfaces every few months to fill the void and distract law enforcement and the general public from finding Seth's murders. The services of the private investigator who spoke to the press was offered to the Rich family and paid for by a third party, and contractually was barred from speaking to the press or anyone outside of law enforcement or the family unless explicitly authorized by the family. So they're saying a third party paid for this Wheeler to be the investigator. And you think about that. That could have been anybody. It could have been somebody with an agenda to prove that Seth Rich was murdered by Hillary Clinton or people tied to Clinton. So this was somebody that was offered by a third party. It wasn't done by the family themselves. And then as part of the contract, Wheeler wasn't supposed to speak about whatever he found. So maybe he found something and he's like, I need to speak out about it. Or a third party just came in and offered this investigation to the Rich family and they didn't want it. But in my new article, which is called Who is Lying About the Murder of Seth Rich, which by the time you're seeing this should be live on activistpost.com, when you look into the spokesman for the family, Brad Bauman, he is a weird character himself. Now, this is the first part, is he said that even if emails do show up, they don't necessarily prove that Seth Rich was working for WikiLeaks. He says, even if tomorrow an email is found, it is not high enough bar of evidence to prove any interactions, as emails can be altered, and we've seen that those interested in pushing conspiracies will stop at nothing to do so. We are a family who's committed to facts, not fake evidence, and they go on and repeat that statement. Now, again, you look at Bauman, who is this spokesman for the family. He actually is a professional Democratic crisis public relations consultant. That's his title, crisis public relations consultant with the group Pastorum, the Pastorum group, which only seems to have been formed in the last year or so, kind of around the time of these leaks. So you can look into that, look into the Pastorum group, look into Bruce Bauman. And now again, to say that Bruce Bauman has a bias speaking for the Rich family is putting it pretty mildly. Obviously, if he's been hired by the Democratic Party to be a crisis management firm, this is a crisis. This is probably the biggest crisis and most disastrous scandal to hit the Democratic Party in at least the last few years, probably in all of the post 9/11 area. Now, obviously, this could possibly act as a barrier to prevent the Rich family from looking further into what they have so far called baseless right-wing conspiracy theories. The second point I want to note is that Rod Wheeler, the private investigator who was interviewed by Fox 5, he has a history of appearing on Fox News as an expert in a variety of fields. One of these interviews that he conducted with Bill O'Reilly a few years ago centered around the alleged rise in the lesbian gangs attacking people in the D.C. area. Now, the Southern Poverty Law Center, first of all, Southern Poverty Law Center, I don't support them. They are a propaganda outlet for the most part, but in this case, they got the facts right. The Southern Poverty Law Center wrote that when Wheeler was confronted by the intelligence report, he was unable, in several phone and email exchanges over a 2-day period, to specify a single law enforcement agency or officer, police report, media account, or any other source that he relied upon for his D.C. area lesbian gangs claim. So this calls into question Wheeler's credibility. That's the reason I bring it up. It's up to each of you to decide if you're going to believe him or not. Thankfully, though, he's not the only person who has spoken about Seth Rich and his connection to WikiLeaks. Fox News also reports on another federal source, unfortunately an anonymous federal source, that confirms that Seth Rich did indeed make contact with WikiLeaks through the now-deceased director Gavin McFadyen. The federal source claims to have seen a copy of a forensic report of Rich's computer which was issued by the FBI within 96 hours of his death. The federal investigator told Fox News, "I have seen and read the emails between Seth Rich and WikiLeaks." He claims that 44,053 emails, 17,761 attachments from DNC leaders between January 2015 and May 2016 were sent from Seth Rich to WikiLeaks director McFadyen before May 21st of last year. Now, Fox News is not the only source of this speculation, though. WikiLeaks themselves have put out a $20,000 US dollar reward for information leading to the conviction for the murder of DNC staffer Seth Rich. And in 2016 on Danish TV, Julian Assange, founder of WikiLeaks, he made some interesting comments about Seth Rich, sort of alluding to the possibility of him being their source. He wouldn't go any further other than just bringing up Seth Rich's death, and he said, "We don't comment on who our sources are. We have to understand how high the stakes are in the United States. Our sources are, our sources face serious risks. That's why they come to us. They seek to protect their anonymity." And he says, "We are investigating. If you want to understand what happened in that situation with Seth Rich, I think it's a concerning situation. There is not a conclusion yet. We would be willing to state a conclusion. We wouldn't be willing to state a conclusion, but we are concerned about it." And the final piece of this very elaborate puzzle rabbit hole involves an actress, former Playboy model, Robin Young, who supposedly, allegedly, had conversations via Twitter, direct messages, with Guccifer 2.0, the alleged hacker in this DNC leaks. And she says that Guccifer admitted in their conversations that he wanted somebody to look into the death of somebody he was working with named Seth. So you have those kind of references to it. Robin Young has the entire conversations on her website, but they haven't been independently verified, so I leave it up to you guys to decide what you think about that, or if that's an important part of the puzzle. The last thing I want to mention to you is that it's important to recognize that Fox's report stems from anonymous federal sources, and that Wheeler's credibility may be in question. However, we should also reflect on the connection between the Democratic Party and the Rich's family spokesman. And when you start doing research and you do a Google of Seth Rich WikiLeaks, you can find an abundance of left-wing media outlets today that are brushing this story off as just a distraction from the latest reports that Donald Trump has shared classified information with the Russians. And you can find right-wing outlets who are defending Trump and saying that today's real big story is Seth Rich. Unfortunately, both of these stories use anonymous sources, and that is a huge problem in the American media landscape and in journalism in general all around the world. Now, is the timing of these two stories related? Is one meant to distract from the other? Or are these two independently important stories that we should all be paying attention to? I'm going to leave that for you guys to decide. For now, though, I will say I do think there's a number of reports, anonymous reports, that do indicate Seth Rich's involvement with WikiLeaks, and I think that warrants further investigation. And if there's any hackers out there or WikiLeaks themselves who have information in their possession that could implicate the Democratic Party officials or people connected to them in the murder of Seth Rich, now is the time to release it. Please. Thank you guys for listening. Once again, my name is Derrick Broze with the Conscious Resistance Network. Please follow us on the Conscious Resistance Network on Facebook. Follow us and subscribe on YouTube at youtube.com/consciousresistance. And if you want to support me and my efforts to bring you true independent journalism that doesn't cater to the left or the right and actually does investigating without just repeating what those two sides say, then perhaps support me on Patreon at patreon.com/DerrickBroze. Thank you guys for your support. Remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free. Peace.